Exposed, how one woman's $5 million gift revealed a heartwarming truth at the charity ball. In the small suburban town of Maplewood, the buzz around the annual charity ball was electrifying. This year, however, it was heightened by whispers of a staggering $5 million contribution from the reclusive widow, Margaret Wells. As people huddled in dimly lit corners, sipping watered-down cocktails, the question on everyone's lips was, what was Margaret really up to? Was this a selfless act to uplift the community, or an excuse to wash away her past misdeeds? For Sarah Thompson, a dedicated nurse and single mother of two, the excitement was complicated. Sarah raced against time, juggling her work at the hospital, caring for her aging mother, and nurturing two energetic children. The clock ticked relentlessly toward the gala, and her heart raced with both adrenaline and stress. She longed for one moment to breathe and feel like she mattered in her own life. As she scoured her closet, searching for something that wouldn't make her appear as though she had rolled out of a nursing shift, a wave of despair washed over her. Memories of past charity balls flooded in, filled with laughter and connections, but those days felt like distant dreams. When the night finally arrived, the community center was ablaze with twinkling lights and laughter. Yet, beneath the surface, there was tension, feelings of resentment and entitlement simmered. As Sarah stepped into the hall, she caught sight of the disparity that plagued her town more vividly than those sparkling decorations. The charity she dedicated her time to her daughter's school had been overlooked years in favor of shiny new projects. Sarah swallowed hard, her heart heavy as she wondered if that $5 million would truly help families like hers, or just the elite. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the evening progressed, stories began to emerge among the crowd. People laughed, cried, and opened their hearts. For every tale of hardship, there was a flicker of resilience. For every account of struggle, there were those willing to support one another. Sarah felt the fire in her heart compelling her to bridge the gaps. She realized that each story mattered and that unity could be an antidote to the divisions growing in their town. Just as the chaos threatened to spiral into bitterness, Margaret Wells took the stage. Silence enveloped the room, everyone's eyes were fixed on her. When she spoke, her voice trembled, revealing aspects of her past the crowd had never known. The widow of a veteran, who had lost everything in the war, she shared how she felt abandoned and lonely, a sentiment that resonated deeply among the audience. As tears streamed down Sarah's face, the unspoken pain enveloped the community. Could they rethink their assumptions? This moment was a call to action, an invitation to face the rifts that had formed without them even realizing. Sarah stood there, heart racing, filled with both hope and uncertainty. This charity ball had become more than an event, it was a reckoning, but could it heal their wounds? As the music swelled, the night beckoned for a resolution, leaving Sarah poised between despair and the promise of unity, yearning for a way forward. As the applause for Margaret's speech faded, Sarah felt a shift in the air. It was as if the weight of the crowd's skepticism dissolved into something lighter, something more hopeful. People whispered to one another, their faces a mix of confusion and curiosity. The emotional barrier had been breached, and the night was teetering on the edge of transformation. Sarah couldn't help but search for her own reflection in the strangers around her. The shared pain illuminated by Margaret's words was palpable, morphing doubt into something approaching connection. She glanced over at her friend Lisa, who stood wide-eyed, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand. Sarah wanted to say something profound, to articulate the swell of emotions rising in her chest, but words failed her. Instead, she took a step forward, her heart racing, and joined Lisa in front of the stage. "What if we offered our stories too?" she suggested quietly. Lisa nodded, her eyes brightening with newfound determination. Yes, people need to hear how we're managing, what we need. The two women exchanged knowing glances, and Sarah could feel the thickening bond. Taking a deep breath, Sarah introduced herself, her voice hesitant at first. I'm Sarah Thompson. I'm a nurse and a single mom. The crowd turned to her, encouraging but tentative. I've been working so hard to provide for my kids, to be there for my mom. And it feels like sometimes we're doing it all alone. The room hung on her words, an electric silence. It was almost comfortable, a shared intimacy where the truth could be released without fear. One by one, others began to stand, articulating their personal struggles: the teacher who worked 2 jobs, the father battling addiction, the couple just trying to keep a roof over their heads. As they shared, the tension in the room shifted to solidarity. The enormity of marginalization was unfolding like a tapestry, each thread woven with struggle and resilience. Amid this raw vulnerability, Sarah felt tears threaten again, but this time they were tears of relief. She was not alone. The community was awakening, they were pushing past the glittering facade of the charity ball and toward something real. Something that mattered. Then, amid the heartfelt revelations, Margaret stepped down from her elevated stage. She looked genuinely moved, her own eyes glistening, a woman exposed not just as a donor, but as a human, sharing in their collective struggle. This is what I hoped for, she murmured, her voice barely rising above a whisper. Connection. Understanding. As the evening continued, music filled the gaps left by silence. Sarah watched the crowd begin to dance, and the laughter that followed was not just from the drinks or the festivities, it was laughter from people who had finally found their voices. The rifts between the families began to shatter, replaced by a new sense of community. Lost in the moment, Sarah felt a tug on her dress. It was her daughter, Emma, swaying with enthusiasm. "Mom, can we dance?" She giggled, her innocence reigniting something within Sarah. "Of course." Sarah breathed, a grin breaking across her face. She took Emma's hand, leading her to the center of the dance floor. As they twirled and spun, Sarah felt the warmth emanating from those around her, a mosaic of lives intermingling, stories merging into one. But just as Sarah began to immerse herself fully in this shared joy, her eyes caught sight of a figure slipping away from the crowd. It was Margaret, her expression unreadable as she made her exit, leaving the gala's magic behind. Something gnawed at Sarah, a feeling of unresolved questions left in Margaret's wake. What did she still have to say? And why the sudden departure? Just as uncertainty settled in, the music shifted, beckoning for all eyes to turn back to the stage once more. The night was just beginning to unfold, and Sarah's heart raced at the possibilities hiding in the shadows. With hope and curiosity intertwined, Sarah dashed after Margaret. What secrets lay beyond the mirrored hallway? She had to know. Sarah's footsteps echoed as she pursued Margaret through the dimly lit hallway, her heart pounding. She wanted to call out, to ask her to stop, but the breathlessness of the moment rendered her voice a mere whisper. The thrumming pulse of the party faded into the background, replaced by the eerie stillness that followed Margaret. As she turned a corner, Sarah spotted her, but Margaret wasn't alone. In a small alcove, Margaret stood before a large window, moonlight cascading over her like a gentle spotlight. She was looking out at the garden, lost in thought. Sarah hesitated, sensing the vulnerability radiating off the other woman. "Margaret," she finally said, her voice steadier than she felt. Margaret turned slowly, her features tinged with a mix of surprise and softness. "Oh, Sarah." Her voice was heavy, almost weary. "I didn't expect anyone to follow me. Are you okay?" "You seemed so moved back there," Sarah ventured, stepping closer. The warmth of the ballroom seemed a distant memory in the cool air of the hallway, charged with moments of intimacy. Margaret sighed, her shoulders drooping as if the weight of the world had settled back onto them. "It's just so much. I've been funding this charity for years, hoping to create a ripple effect. But tonight felt different. I felt seen. Isn't that what you wanted? Sarah asked, unable to mask the concern in her voice. To connect, to make a difference? Margaret's eyes shimmered, hinting at a story untold. You'd think so. But sometimes I wonder if I'm doing more harm than good. I see the faces in that crowd, each one holding pain I can't fix with money alone. Sarah listened, her heart aching for this woman she had barely known. You opened a door tonight. You brought us together. I think that's a start. A shaky smile crossed Margaret's lips, but it quickly faded. But what happens after the party ends? Aren't we just going back to the same lives of struggle? Is it enough? With a deep breath, Sarah understood the unraveling emotions that accompanied wealth and privilege. Change is messy, Margaret. But it begins with conversations, with feelings, like what just happened. People are scared, unsure, and your gift helped light a path. They need to know they're not alone. Margaret's gaze moved beyond Sarah, seemingly lost in the darkness outside, reflecting on all the uncertainty ahead. Sometimes it feels like I'm just a figurehead, a name on a check. Not a real part of the solution. Then become part of it, Sarah suggested, a spark igniting in her chest. Share your journey. Let them see you, the real you. You can help them see their own struggles as part of a shared experience. Margaret looked at Sarah, and for the first time, a flicker of hope danced in her eyes. Do you really think they would care? They already do. You've challenged them to open up. You've sparked something, Sarah encouraged. And who knows? Maybe your story will inspire others to join the fight for real change. You'll never know unless you try. Before Margaret could respond, they both heard the crescendo of laughter rising from the ballroom, a reminder of the night's magic. A moment of silence drew them closer, and Sarah felt an unspoken bond forming. But just then, a voice cut through the air, calling Sarah back. Mom! Where are you? It was Emma's sweet, innocent plea, filled with concern. Sarah's heart clenched, torn between the warmth of this encounter and the call of her child. With a squeeze of Margaret's hand, she stepped back. You have to take this chance. Reach out and share. As she turned to go, Margaret called after her. Thank you, Sarah. I'll think about what you said. I believe in you. Sarah replied, while a deeper resolve warmed her heart. As she re-entered the ballroom, the atmosphere buzzed with energy. Yet, within her, there was a dangerous decision hanging in the air. Margaret was no longer just a donor, she was a potential ally. Would she truly take the leap? Or would their fleeting moment together dissipate into nothing? Sarah looked back over her shoulder toward the hallway, a mix of hope and dread simmering in her stomach. The night felt charged with possibility, but uncertainty loomed large. How far would Margaret go to reconcile her past with a future of genuine involvement? And what would that mean for Sarah as the voice of change in a community so desperately in need? She had to know. As Sarah rejoined the lively atmosphere of the ballroom, she felt the energy envelop her like a warm blanket. Laughter floated through the air, mingling with the clinking of glasses and the hushed excitement of conversations. But her mind was still trailing behind, held captive by the encounter with Margaret. She couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had shifted between them. Scanning the crowd, Sarah finally spotted Emma weaving her way through the throng of guests. Her daughter's little face lit up with a smile that radiated innocence, and for a moment, Sarah's worries melted away. She reached down, welcoming Emma into her arms. "Mom, where were you?" Emma asked, tilting her head. She was a mini version of herself, unaware of the weighty conversations swirling around her mother. "I was just talking to someone," Sarah replied, her heart swelling at the trust radiating from Emma's tiny hands wrapping around her neck. "But it's okay now. I'm back with you." Emma beamed. "Can we dance?" "Of course," Sarah said, feeling the familiar tug of joy that only her daughter could ignite. They moved to the center of the playful chaos, Sarah twirling Emma as they joined the others on the dance floor. The music pulsed around them, lifting their spirits higher. Amidst the fun, Sarah couldn't help but cast furtive glances toward Margaret, who stood on the edge of the crowd now, a glass of champagne in hand. A group of well-dressed guests had encircled her, laughing and engaging in animated chatter. Yet, despite the cheerful atmosphere, there was an unmistakable tension in Margaret's posture. "Isn't she pretty?" Emma said, pointing towards Margaret, her voice bright and innocent. "Yes," Sarah agreed, forcing a smile. "She's really kind, too." Emma's eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Can we go say hi?" For an instant, Sarah hesitated. A rush of dread washed over her. What if Margaret was still reeling from their earlier talk? What if she still felt overwhelmed? "Maybe later, sweetie. Let us enjoy our dance for now." Emma pouted for a moment before burying her face against Sarah's dress, a tactile protest against delay. The child's innocence stung. It made Sarah wonder if her own fears were holding her back from sharing something real and beautiful with her daughter. As the song shifted to a slower, softer melody, Sarah held Emma tighter, memories of her late husband surfacing like ghosts. This moment of joy felt fragile, easily threatened by the weight of her thoughts about Margaret. Just then, Sarah spotted Margaret looking somewhat lost, her smile fading even in the midst of the crowd. The women's eyes met briefly, and Sarah felt a jolt of recognition. Margaret was not just a wealthy benefactor, she was a human, grappling with her place in the world, and she needed support just like everyone else. There's so much she can do if she embraces the challenge, Sarah thought, the bittersweet thought feeling like a call to action. She pulled away from Emma, crouching to meet her daughter's eyes. "How about we invite Margaret to dance with us?" Emma's face lit up. "Yes. She can dance with us." With newfound determination, Sarah walked towards Margaret, Emma tugging at her hand, excitement radiating from her small frame. As they approached, the laughter of the guests faded, and a hush settled as they drew closer. "Margaret!" Sarah called. The moment felt electric, and she sensed a collective breath-holding from the bystanders. Margaret looked up, clearly surprised but hopeful, her eyes flickering between them as if searching for reassurance. "Would you like to dance with us?" Sarah asked, her heart pounding. Margaret hesitated, but the warmth in Sarah's inviting smile seemed to soften the edges of her apprehension. "I'd love to," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. As they joined the rhythm of the music together, the moment bound them in an unexpected way. Margaret took Emma's hand and twirled her playfully, laughter bubbling up as the little girl spun with joy. In that instant, while watching Margaret connect with Emma, Sarah felt the fragile threads of possibility weaving into something more substantial. Could this night be a turning point, not just for Margaret, but for them all? But as they danced, serious thoughts lingered. Would Margaret truly take that step into vulnerability, or would she retreat back to her gilded cage? It all hinged on how deeply she was willing to expose her heart, and Sarah wasn't sure if Margaret knew what that required. The dance carried on, the future uncertain, but Sarah felt herself stepping into a more hopeful narrative. But what lay ahead could change everything they thought they knew about themselves and each other. As the music swelled, Sarah lost herself in the unexpected joy of the moment. Margaret's eyes sparkled, the tension beginning to lift from her shoulders, and a warmth spread across her face as she twirled Emma again. The laughter was contagious, and soon the trio became the center of attention, the crowd re-engaging with their shared joy. Yet, in the midst of this lightness, Sarah noticed something deeper lurking behind Margaret's smiles. Flashes of insecurity skimmed across her features, almost imperceptible, like shadows dancing just out of reach of the lantern's glow. This moment of connection was priceless, yet it felt like a fragile bubble, one poke could leave everything deflated. "Emma, how about another spin?" Sarah said, lifting her daughter with unwavering enthusiasm. Emma giggled, her laughter tinkling like chimes, and in that sound, Sarah found her own heart softening. Margaret watched them, her eyes widened as Emma's delight emanated across the space like a beam of light. For a fleeting second, Margaret seemed to realize what she had been missing all along, the simple joy of being known and loved, of stepping out of her fortress. But just as quickly, that twinkle vanished, replaced by a veil of uncertainty. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, trying to step into that moment of vulnerability. The music played on, the world outside this tiny bubble faded, but for Margaret, it seemed like everything crashed together. It's perfect," Margaret replied, though the quiver in her voice suggested otherwise. Sarah moved closer, dismissing the noise around them, sensing Margaret's struggle. "Just breathe," she whispered, offering a gentle nudge of encouragement. "You can be honest here." Margaret's lips parted, as if something profound struggled to break free. Instead, she forced a smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you for including me. Moments like this, they're rare." And with that admission, a shared silence enveloped them. Their surroundings echoed with laughter and music, but here, there was an unspoken understanding, a realization that through all the opulence, it was the simplicity of connection that mattered most. Emma suddenly interjected, breaking the moment. "Can we play a game?" Her innocent request sparked a laugh from both women, the tension momentarily forgotten. "What kind of game?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with warmth. "One where we hold hands, and everyone else has to guess who our favorite person is," Emma declared, her excitement bubbling over. They both looked at Margaret, her initial surprise morphing into amusement at the child's ingenuity. "I think I might be game for that," she said, her shoulders relaxing. Before they knew it, the three of them formed a small circle, little Emma perched between them, hands clasped tightly. It felt like creating a safe haven, a tiny world that echoed with laughter and unfiltered joy. Sarah watched the small spark of life jump into Margaret's eyes. It was as if, through Emma's innocence, Margaret was awakening to something buried deep inside her, a craving for connection. And for the first time, Sarah realized that maybe this wasn't only about her making a connection with Margaret. It could be about Margaret finding her own way to reconnect with herself. Just then, the music softened to a gentle lull, the crowd mingled again, laughter growing distant as Sarah felt the shift. "Tonight's just the beginning, isn't it?" Margaret mused aloud, looking at Sarah with newfound determination, as if a door had cracked open just a little. "Yes, it is," Sarah replied, feeling hope blooming within her heart. But then, a fear crept in. What if Margaret's journey demanded more than just a dance? What if she would need the courage to face her own truths? As the evening unfurled, tense anticipation settled around them. The night was still young, yet the possibilities loomed larger than they had moments before. With their hands linked tightly and hearts open, they stepped towards a new chapter, but as new paths beckoned, could they find the strength to walk them together? The night air grew thick with anticipation as conversations swirled around them. Sarah's heart began to beat faster, sensing the weight of unspoken truths hanging in the balance. Margaret's smile, though gentle, faltered for just a moment, and Sarah recognized it as a signal. "Are you ready?" Sarah asked softly, her eyes locked on Margaret's. Margaret hesitated. The music shifted again, turning from upbeat to a more tender tune that seemed to echo their uncertainty. "Ready for what?" she replied, trying to keep her tone light, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "To see where this leads, to explore what you really want," Sarah encouraged, not wanting to push but feeling the pull of truth between them. It was as if the air itself was charged with everything they hadn't yet said. Margaret's brow furrowed. Have I ever known? It feels easier to hide." Sarah squeezed her hand, a simple gesture of solidarity. "Hiding can feel safer, but it can also feel lonely. Look around. We're all sharing something tonight: stories, laughter, connection." Inside, Margaret felt a confusion that tightened her chest. Though the weight of their meaningful conversation was monumental, somewhere inside her, a flicker of hope sparked. She glanced at Emma, blissfully unaware, her energy a refreshing balm against the shadows creeping in. Maybe I'm ready, Margaret said finally, the weight of her admission almost grounding. She looked up, her gaze catching Sarah's, and there was a moment of understanding, a silent agreement to take a leap together. Just then, Emma, oblivious to the intensity of their exchange, pulled on Margaret's arm excitedly. Look! They're about to announce the charity winner. She pointed gleefully towards a small stage where a spotlight glinted off a shiny trophy. Right! Sarah exclaimed, dragging her focus back to the present. This is what we came for. Let us see who wins. As they turned their heads towards the crowd gathering near the stage, the host stepped into the light, microphone in hand, and the air grew electric with excitement. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your generous bids and donations tonight. We're here to announce the recipient of this year's grand charity prize. The hostess' voice boomed as the crowd erupted into cheers. Margaret felt a knot in her stomach. She had invested more into the charity than most, a sizable donation of $5 million still not fully settled in her heart. Was this genuinely about helping others, or merely a cover for her own guilt? The host cleared his throat, and the winner he paused for dramatic effect, causing the assembly to lean in closer. The Heart Foundation, for their phenomenal work on mental health awareness. A wave of applause filled the room. Sarah's eyes sparkled, while Emma clapped her hands with delight. Yet, Margaret felt the heat rise to her cheeks. What would they think of her? Of her struggles? Questions swarmed her mind like bees. You did it! Sarah cheered, squeezing Margaret's hand tighter, sensing the struggle within her. You were part of this. Don't let uncertainty take away your joy. Margaret opened her mouth as if to protest, but no words came. Instead, an unexpected wave of emotion swelled inside her, and to her surprise, she felt a hint of pride mixed with fear. As the Heart Foundation received their award, Margaret's heart raced with a realization perhaps the only way forward was to let go of those fears and embrace this journey toward vulnerability even if it terrified her. But before she could lean fully into that thought, a voice echoed in the back of her mind, whispering doubts. Would this moment define her, or would she allow her fear to overshadow her hope? As the applause faded out, Sarah turned to Margaret again, a hopeful glimmer in her eyes. Let us go talk to them. You should meet the winner. The intensity of the night clashed with Margaret's swirling thoughts, the fear of exposure and the desire for connection battling fiercely within her. With the spotlight on them and their next step hanging in the air, could this night be the door through which Margaret would finally step out of the shadows? Would she find the courage to truly be seen? The crowd buzzed with excitement, but Margaret felt like she was standing in a vacuum. Sarah's hand held hers, steadying her, but inside, a storm brewed. Uncertainty clawed at her chest, making it hard to breathe. The applause faded into a distant roar, leaving just her racing heartbeat echoing in her ears. Are you coming? Emma laughed, tugging at her sleeve, her innocence pulling Margaret back into the moment. Giving a quick nod, she allowed Sarah to lead her toward the stage, every step an exercise in vulnerability. As they approached, the winners celebrated with tearful smiles and grateful speeches. Margaret couldn't shake the feeling of being an imposter amidst their joy. After all, her donation wasn't just an act of kindness, it was her way of coping with guilt. It had become a shield, but now the weight of it threatened to crush her under the brightness of their moment. Margaret, Sarah's voice was soft, yet firm, pulling her from her spiraling thoughts. You belong here. Does it even matter? She whispered, glancing back at the crowd, her heart aching. The laughter, the celebration all felt foreign to her now. Would they ever see her for who she truly was? Of course it matters, Sarah countered, her grip tightening. Your support is making a difference. Don't hide from it. When they finally reached the stage, Margaret was thrust into an unexpected moment of spotlight, causing her to stumble slightly. The faces around her were a blur, their cheers felt muted, and all she could focus on was the young woman at the podium, radiant and inspiring. "Thank you so much for all your support," the president of the Heart Foundation exclaimed, breathless. "It's donors like Margaret who help keep our mission alive. We want to honor each and every one of you tonight." Margaret stood frozen, the weight of his words crashing over her, like a wave she had never expected. Here she was, one of the many, but why did it feel so isolating? The young president's smile broke through her thoughts, igniting a flicker of recognition. She wasn't just a donor, she was a part of this community. "Margaret?" The voice pulled her back, and she saw the president heading toward her. "We've heard so much about your contribution. It's quite amazing, thank you." Blushing deeply, Margaret felt Sarah next to her, pride radiating from her in waves. Yet, insecurity still hung in the air, threatening to tether her to the ground. I just wanted to help," Margaret stammered, the weight of her words caged by fear. "I didn't mean to make it about me." "It's not about making it about you," the woman replied, sincerity in her eyes. "It's about being part of something bigger than ourselves. You've done something incredible." Margaret's throat tightened. Did she deserve this praise? Her mind raced back to nights spent in turmoil, grappling with her demons. Could vulnerability be seen as strength? The million questions danced in her mind, an unrelenting pulse. As applause erupted around her, a voice in her heart nudged her on. Maybe this was the moment. Could she allow herself to step into the light? What if she shared her story, her struggles, her fears? Perhaps within that honesty, she would find the connection she craved. Just as she opened her mouth to speak, a commotion erupted at the edge of the stage, pulling her attention away. A figure rushed past, knocking over a nearby chair, their eyes frantic. "What is going on?" Sarah asked, her expression shifting from encouragement to concern. Margaret instinctively felt her pulse quicken again. The energy in the room changed, tension tightening the air. She caught a glimpse of the figure making a beeline toward the exit, as whispers erupted among the crowd. With her heart pounding, Margaret looked to Sarah, seeking answers. Could everything change in an instant? What would happen next, and would she find herself lost in that chaos or finally find her way out of the shadows into the light of understanding? Margaret's heart raced as she shifted her gaze from the frantic figure to the buzzing crowd. The atmosphere thickened with nervous energy, and conversation simmered into murmurs of confusion. Faces turned, eyes wide with surprise, and she felt the weight of scrutiny settle on her like a heavy cloak. "What is going on?" she repeated, this time louder, her voice steadying as adrenaline coursed through her. Sarah squeezed her hand tighter, grounding her in the turmoil. "I don't know. But we should find out." As they moved closer to the edge of the stage, Margaret caught snippets of panicked dialogue. "Did you see that? Who was that? Is everything okay? Someone call for help." Through the throng of people, the figure continued to rush toward the exit. Margaret squinted, trying to focus. The momentary chaos seemed to stretch time, each second an eternity as she followed the fleeting silhouette. She recognized him now, the tall man with tousled hair. It was Daniel, her late father's business partner, introduced only once at a charity event years ago. Why would he be here? She thought, her mind racing. Memories flooded back unbidden, lingering regret about their unfinished business and the conversations that had turned sour after her father's passing. Did he know about her donation? Had her father's shadow haunted him all these years? "Let us go, Margaret," Sarah urged, her voice slicing through her thoughts. They maneuvered through the crowd, heartbeats sinking with each hurried step. Reaching the doorway, they found Daniel leaning against the wall in the hallway, panting as if he had just run a marathon. Something seemed off, dread pooled in Margaret's stomach. She stepped forward, Sarah trailing close behind, and hesitated. She had been preparing to expose her truths, but suddenly, she felt vulnerable again. "Daniel!" she called, her voice catching in the air. He looked up, his eyes clouded with desperation. "Oh, Margaret," he gasped, an overwhelmed expression crossing his face. "I couldn't." He stumbled over his words, his hands shaking slightly. "What happened?" she pressed, uncertainty curling around them. The world behind her faded away as she locked eyes with him, willing him to share whatever burden weighed so heavily upon him. "It's the foundation," he blurted, breathing heavily. "There's something you don't know. Something about the donations, your donation." Margaret's heart began to race again. What did he mean? Did she inadvertently become part of something sinister? Was everything she believed in about to crumble? Before she could respond, the murmurs from the crowd surged into frantic shouts as other guests began spilling into the hallway, concern etched on their faces. "Margaret, you need to be careful," Daniel said, urgency in his voice. "They won't understand. They think you're part of it." "Part of what?" she spat, confusion twisting her stomach into knots. "What are you talking about?" Daniel's eyes darted around them, and he stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You need to know the truth before it's too late. It's about the Heart Foundation and you." Tension surged between them as she tried to catch her breath. Could she trust him? Suddenly, a sharp voice interrupted, breaking the moment. "Daniel! Move away from her." It was Emma, her eyes blazing with determination as she rushed toward them, flanked by a few of the other committee members. Margaret felt the heat rising within her, the uncertainty, fear, and the longing for clarity. As the crowd closed in, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the brink of something monumental. What had she become a part of? Would the truth tear her out of this world she tried to step into? Margaret was teetering on the edge of discovery, and the horizon of her journey shifted dramatically. In that charged moment, everything felt raw and real. The next step she took might change everything. "Stop!" she shouted, finding her voice amidst the chaos. "I need to understand." And just like that, the stage was set for a confrontation that could shift her entire world. Would she finally confront her fears, or could the truth shatter the fragile foundation she had managed to build? The hallway echoed with tension as Emma pushed her way through the crowd, the energy crackling like static in the air. Margaret's heart pounded harder, the urgency of the moment almost unbearable. Questions whirled in her mind like autumn leaves in the wind. What was going on with the foundation? How was she involved? What did Daniel mean by the truth? "Get away from her, Daniel!" Emma shouted, her voice laced with authority. The committee members behind her formed a wall, eyes darting nervously between Daniel and Margaret, as if waiting for a signal to pounce. "Emma, wait!" Margaret cried out, desperation spilling into her voice. "I need to know what Daniel's talking about." Emma's fierce gaze softened, if only for a moment, and she turned back slightly. "Margaret, it's not safe. You have to trust me on this." But Margaret felt like she was on a precipice. She glanced at Daniel, whose face held a mix of fear and determination. The crowd was starting to close in, their whispers a low hum through the corridor. Each second felt like a countdown. "You don't understand," Daniel pleaded, desperation bleeding into his tone. "You're in the middle of something bigger than you realize. Your donation, it's tied to the foundation, and it's not what it seems. Just tell me." The words escaped her lips, raw with emotion. It was a plea, a desperate search for clarity in the chaos spinning around her. Okay, Daniel began, his voice shaking. "Years ago, before your father passed, he discovered some discrepancies. Money was being diverted for purposes that were shady at best. He tried to distance himself from it, but stop." Emma interjected. The fire in her eyes returned, blazing like a beacon. "You have to understand, Margaret. There are a lot of powerful people involved in this. The last thing we need is for this information to get out in a public setting like this. Margaret felt her sense of agency slipping away, frustration boiling just under the surface. You can't just brush me aside. This is about me. About my family. If there is something wrong, I deserve to know. Outside the enclosure of pressing figures, Margaret could see glances exchanged between the committee members that spoke of hidden agendas and hushed conversations. It hit her, whatever was going on had layers she hadn't even begun to uncover. Daniel, please, she pleaded. If there is a threat, tell me what I need to do. I want to help. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but dread washed over his face. No, they can't know you're involved. Before he could elaborate, Emma stepped forward, her expression hardening once more. Margaret, listen to me. You're in over your head. We can't let this go any further right now. Trust the process. Margaret's heart sank. A part of her wanted to trust, to pull back from the edge of chaos. But another part, the very heart that had propelled her to donate so generously, needed to push through and understand. What happens next? She asked, her voice firm but laced with uncertainty. What about the people who are counting on the foundation? The applause and voices from the main hall were a mere background hum now. The tension between the trio stood front and center. Silence fell, heavy and palpable, drowning out the cacophony just beyond their circle. Emma's expression softened momentarily, but then she turned back to the crowd. Let us adjourn this discussion for now, she declared, her tone final. We'll regroup tomorrow. Tomorrow? Margaret echoed, disbelief and burning frustration flooding her. You can't just walk away from this. Before she could voice her mounting confusion and anger, Daniel leaned in closer. His voice barely a whisper, he said, you have it in you to change everything. Just don't trust easily. Not everyone is who they seem. With that cryptic warning, he slipped away, disappearing into the crowd. Margaret felt her world closing in, questions clawing at her insides. What was Daniel really trying to say? As she watched Emma rally the others, her heart raced. She was done being passive. Tomorrow would bring answers, but first, she had to figure out what kind of courage it would take to implore the truth from those she thought she could trust. Tomorrow, she whispered to herself, determination flickering deep within. I have to get to the bottom of this. And just like that, Margaret knew she was stepping into a battle not only for clarity but for her very identity. Would the next day lead her closer to truth or deepen the shadows cast by uncertainty? The answer awaited her, tantalizing yet terrifying, just beyond the dawn. The sun broke over Maplewood the next day, spilling golden light across the town and revealing a fresh world. For Margaret, however, it felt like a weighty reminder of the turmoil that had swirled around her the night before. With determination, she stood in front of the mirror, her reflection a mosaic of anxiety and resolve. She had to confront the ragged edge of uncertainty and take back her narrative. Stepping outside, the crisp air filled her lungs, invigorating her spirit. She headed toward the community center. It was time. Time to seek answers, time to untangle the web of mystery surrounding her donation and herself. Each stride felt heavier than the last, but Margaret steadied her heart. If there was a chance to create an authentic connection, to offer hope where she had once only chained herself with guilt, she had to take it. As she entered the center, a buzz filled the space. Committee members exchanged glances, hushed tones swirling like smoky whispers. Emma caught sight of Margaret and rushed over, her youthful enthusiasm still bright, but tinted now with concern. Margaret. I'm glad to see you. We've been trying to discuss everything, she said, glancing around nervously. Yes, I need to know everything, Margaret said firmly. What is really going on with the foundation? I can't shake the feeling that I'm a pawn in something bigger. Emma studied her, a mix of admiration and trepidation on her face. All right, but you have to promise to be careful. There are things I can't wholly explain, but we need to meet with the others first. With a deep breath, Margaret steeled herself. She felt the grip of fear loosen just a fraction as a spark of courage ignited within. They moved through the hall toward a side room, where the committee members had gathered. The atmosphere buzzed with underlying tension, eyes darting with uncertainty. Taking the lead, Emma addressed the group. "Thank you all for coming. We need to talk about Margaret and her donation in relation to the Heart Foundation." Margaret felt every gaze turned toward her, each look an invitation to share the struggle she had kept buried. "Last night, I learned there might be some discrepancies involving my contribution, and I can't just stand by. I want to be involved, to make things right." The room fell silent. Margaret took a step forward, her heart racing. "I know it's easier to brush over issues and pretend everything is fine, but I can't do that anymore. Not when it comes to the people we're supposed to help." A woman from the back of the room spoke up, her voice timid yet determined. "Margaret, we only utilized your donation to support initiatives we thought were ethical. But I fear those ethics have been compromised." "Compromised how?" Margaret pressed, her breath hitching with urgency. A network of voices responded, some full of worry, others steeped in anger, spilling out stories and concerns, uncovering layers upon layers of mismanagement and deception. It was all coming to light, and Margaret felt each revelation shake her to her core. "I can't believe this is happening," Emma exclaimed, realizing the depth of betrayal. "We have to take action. We can't let this go on." As discussions turned from their fears into ideas of a united front, something ignited in Margaret. The shadows of her guilt were replaced with a fierce sense of purpose. Each story shared, every resentment voiced, it was all a testament to the heart of their community, a call to arms for what was right. Later, as they stood together, a collective determination filled the room. They resolved to confront the board, to unravel the truths that had been hidden beneath the surface. It would take courage, but together they would take that leap. As Margaret glanced around at the group, she found comfort in their shared resolve. "We have each other. This community is worth fighting for," she declared, her voice growing stronger. "I'm ready to face whatever comes next. My father would want me to stand up for what's right for each of you." In that moment, surrounded by the fierce spirits of each committee member, Margaret felt liberated, armed with purpose. She pictured herself no longer as a mere benefactor, but as a leader rising from her past, ready for genuine change. As they prepared for the confrontation ahead, hope swelled within Margaret's chest. She was learning to embrace vulnerability and strength in tandem, to stand tall amidst uncertainty. And so, together they stepped toward a monumental confrontation that would reveal the raw truths of their community. The journey ahead was bound to be tumultuous, but now, they faced it united, forging a path lit with connections rather than shadows, optimism rather than dread. This was not just about the foundation or her donation anymore, it was about healing a community, rekindling unity, and finding a way forward into the light. Together, they could transform not just themselves, but Maplewood. Margaret never thought she would find such courage within herself, and yet, here she was ready to be part of the change she longed for. The future remained uncertain but brightly beckoned, and Margaret felt more alive than ever before. Now, it was time to face the truth and rise together. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and let your voice be heard. Comment your reactions and feelings about this ending. Your thoughts matter. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Don't wait not even one more second. Only true fans understand how important it is to support the channel through these actions.